Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Ida Johansson and I'm going to be your host for this talk. Our discussion today is going to be about how technology and experiences are linked. We're going to dive into how technology utilizes our hearing and sight to enable the most amazing audiovisual technologies and audiovisual experiences, and how this is such a vital part of our daily life, even though we rarely notice the technology behind it at all. What a better way to illustrate this point than by hosting this talk live from Sound Engine Studios together with my colleagues, Ossi Hakansuu, Head of Audiovisual Solutions at Caverion Finland, and Johanna Kari, Product Manager at Caverion Finland. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Nice to have both of you here. I'm going to risk saying that audiovisual solutions is one of the most emotional of all technologies. It quite literally represents what we hear and what we see. And when people think about audiovisual technologies, they usually think about large-scale events such as IMAX cinemas or, rock concerts. But when I've spoken to people who work with audiovisual solutions, there seems to be a curious thing combining a lot of you. And a lot of you seem to have some sort of story behind how you got involved with audiovisual technology. Am I right?
Well, you sure are. I've always been interested in electronics, and especially everything related to audiovisual. I think it started around late 90s when I first started working as an AV tech in events. Well, of course, first it was more like carrying big boxes and road cases and speakers rather than being an actual AV technician. Fun fact, by the way, back then I first met Erkki Kastreen, whose studios we are now sitting in, here in Engine Studios. At the same time, I also started doing some DJing and also AV installations. It was more of a way to get some extra cash while I was studying. Later on, I got my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. And I kind of envisioned myself doing maybe some electrical designing. But when I applied for my first grown-up job in a company called Pöyry, the guy who was interviewing me looked at my CV and said, I see that you're applying as an electrical designer, but we are also looking for an AV designer. And I think you would fit that job perfectly. I'm not sure because their previous AV designer who was just retiring was also called Ossi. So I'm not sure if they hired me just because of my background and my skills or just so they didn't have to learn a new name. It kind of was that I tried to get away from AV, but the AV pulled me back. I do have to say that since then I really haven't tried to get away from AV because I love what I do.
I think it's such an amazing coincidence that both of you were called Ossi, because that really is not one of the most common Finnish names.
Yeah.
But what about you, Johanna?
You are so right, Ida. AV is in my DNA, it's in my blood. I can tell you that I can thank my family because my father was a classical guitar teacher when I was growing up, and he had a band also that he played in. He started a company, music store, and loudspeaker manufacturing. So that lasted over 40 years, actually. So in the early 80s, bands started to rent both sound equipment and lighting equipment, and I kind of slided in there and joined our family business in a way that I was touring with those bands. So I was learning myself AV technology and sales at the same time. So when I got older, I noticed that this is not quite my thing anymore, and shifted more towards commercial or AV systems and sales and sound in teaching, sound technology teaching. I did my master's in art university, which is not very obvious way if you are planning to have a career in building technology with engineers. But I'm here and I'm happy here.
Oh, you both have such amazing backgrounds, and together you could basically form your own roadshow, AV roadshow, with both the front and backstage know-how. That's incredible. But it sounds like both of you have a lot on hands-on experience with AV solutions, and you've been around for a longer time, so you know how AV solutions have developed over the years. Tell me, has it changed much?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the principles are still the same, but the technology has developed a lot. The screens are getting bigger and brighter, but also the devices or boxes are getting smaller and smarter. When you think about it, about 20 years ago, when I started in AV, an auditorium, for example, it had tons of equipment. It costed a small fortune, and it took forever to install and set up, and it wasn't also that easy to use. You couldn't just walk in 5 minutes before your presentation and expect everything to work like that. You you needed some preparation or even a technician to run it. Nowadays, typical system usually fits in one rack, maybe even a small one. Audio, video, and control signals, they just flow through IP network. The presenter usually brings their own laptop. There's not so many fixed sources anymore, or discs or slides to prepare. And the auditorium is controlled usually with very intuitive, user-friendly touchscreen, quite easily. Also, you can broadcast your presentation quite easily with Teams or other media to participants basically anywhere in the world. So 20 years ago, that was, well, if not impossible, it would have required quite heavy, expensive equipment and hard work.
Absolutely.
So technology changes all the time, but the fundamentals behind there stays the same. It's all about creating the experience. So without the people that is requiring the experience or is having the experience, there's no point making those systems.
You're absolutely correct. And yet, AV might not be the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Caverion, and yet it's such an integral part of how we interact with our surroundings, how we receive and process information. So tell me, what is AV within Caverion?
Well, many years ago at Caverion, we recognize the AV as one of the critical technologies in a building technologies. Mm-hmm. So it requires special knowledge and expertise. So if you think about the whole building technologies like electricity, lighting, CCTV, automation, AV is a natural extension to that. Since we are already doing all the technologies in a building, why stop at the visible or audible interface, the part that user actually uses?
You're absolutely correct there. It's what it always comes down to. It's the user and what the user needs. That's the most important thing. And well, we all know that even the best of installations or technologies can be messed up with a bad user interface, unfortunately.
Exactly. Smart buildings are some of many different systems. And when the integrator is the same, the different system, the whole thing just usually works better together. You might have all these systems in a building and different integrators providing those systems. And the worst scenario is that the systems don't talk to each other. You know, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and so on. And that's usually the result of having multiple integrators. So everyone focusing just on their system means that no one is actually thinking of the whole. On the other hand, one integrator means that we cannot hide behind the excuse of bad integration. We are the integrator. I do want to point out that we don't manufacture the components or the devices ourselves. We select the best products in the market that meet our quality standards. We are open to change the devices within the system. The whole system is open, so we are not creating a vendor lock. But we do select the best devices for each segment that we do, and we are open to new ones all the time.
Okay, I'm going to focus a bit on the thing that you used the word segment. Could you tell me a little bit more? What exactly do you mean with AV segments?
Yeah, AV is in so many places that it's kind of hard to grasp where exactly is AV and what different things we do. That's why I like to put it in different segments. It's a little bit easier to explain. If I cut it down to 4 segments, first, the obvious one, the segment that I like to call experience AV. That can mean casinos, museums, amusement parks, arenas, stadiums, basically places where you go to have an experience, to go to be amused or entertained.
So a bit like this one.
Yeah. In these places, AV usually plays a big role. You can really see and hear our work. Another segment that is one of our very key segments is meeting communications. That can be meeting rooms, auditoriums, committee halls, lecture halls, and so on. In these places, AV helps people to get their message through, to communicate with each other. The AV there is not that noticeable, but it makes all the difference. Then there is mission critical. So like medical AV in hospitals or control rooms, maybe police, military, these types of places. And in those, you really need to rely on the AV to work. There's really no excuse for failure. In extreme cases, it might be a matter of life and death. And I'm very proud to say that we are one of the biggest suppliers in Finland for these kinds of systems. And finally, digital signage and guiding. It can mean anything from advertising or brand building to directing or guiding people to showing building management system content. The backend is there. The customer can use it on what purpose they want to. For example, we in Caverion, in our headquarters, we use it to visualize the data from our smart view.
Oh yes, I think I've seen those screens actually. So, to recap, we have 4 main segments ranging from this sort of venue event AV all the way to mission critical systems that need to work, like control rooms. And when I think of control rooms, for me it's also a part of like security and access systems, are they distinct from AV?
No, actually, we are very close. We work very closely with the security guys to provide AV systems, for example, in a control rooms, as a one Caverion team. So we are the only supplier that can provide all the technology, for example, in a control room. So AV is actually combining all the technologies to a one usable interface. So when a situation, for example, needs some attention, CCTV can show the images in a control room of that situation. Voice alarm or evacuation is making the announcement manually or automatically. Maybe digital signage is displaying the messages on screens, for example, in shopping malls. And access control can open doors or locking doors and so on. So what the customer needs is a functional and working building. So AV is combining all the technologies to work as a combined, synchronized one system and not as a many separate user interfaces and systems. So in that sense, AV is kind of the combiner here.
Yeah. Do you have any specific project that comes to mind?
Well, I always like to tell about the Bosch discussion systems in the Finnish Parliament House that we did with the IT department planner at the Parliament.
Okay, I think we actually have a video of that. Let's take a look.
My name is Juhana Kari. I'm a product manager in Caverion, Finland, mainly focusing on the conference systems and evac systems. Today we are at the Finnish Parliament House at one of the committee rooms. The conference projects in Finland are mainly in city consoles. So that means that the consoles will have the new sound system and the new AV system, and part of that, new voting system and discuss systems. IP is getting more and more important in audio distribution. I can say that almost 100% of the new projects will be IP-based.
My name is Jarmo Erling. I'm working here in Finnish Parliament as a planner in IT department. I was a project owner of the AV project. I had to see that it's easy to use, it's reliable. This project was very, very heavily pressured for me.
If you look at the system that serves the whole country, it has to be perfect. Over the last 5 years, we have been doing many projects with these engines in Finnish Parliament.
We have 3 rooms where we have these chargers. 2 are wired and 1 is wireless.
In this room we have a wired engine system, total of 75 units, and this is used mainly as a committee rooms. Actually in this room I was the programmer also. We have a second room with the wired system with 25 system and cameras to fully track the speaker.
And now it's good to see that the IV is also going over IP.
Since the audio is in the IP network, it's really easily controlled and supervised. All the rooms are easily connected through the IP network.
Well, the design system is good, and we're using now it's only the basis. I'm happy with the solution. It's what we wanted.
It is a great feeling to take part in a project in the Finnish Parliament House. So the facilities, the house itself, the personnel here is it's really nice.
Well, no news is good news. So no one has complained, so it's working well.
So it's really making me proud.
It makes my life easier.
That's such a great example, and he has such a good point that encompasses, I think, everything about AV solutions and, well, maybe building technology in general. people only complain when something doesn't work. So no news, that's basically always good news. Otherwise, we would surely know about it, I think. But tell me a little bit more about these projects. What goes on behind the scenes?
Well, that video was just about the conference system. It is a crucial part of the AV in the Finnish parliament, but we have done a lot more there that you don't see in the video. For example, we have done all the committee rooms there and tons of other AV systems. This project was particularly challenging because it's a conserved building, and we had to, of course, honor that and hide as much AV and technology there as we could. For example, there's these recessed, plastered over and painted speakers that are basically invisible for naked eye.
That's really cool.
Yeah. We're also doing the service and maintenance in the Finnish parliament, so they do rely on our expertise.
That is one of my favorite projects, I must say. It sounds amazing. And it all becomes so much more tangible with these real-life experiences and real-life examples of how we really use the technology without even noticing it. It's just so much easier to understand, I think. But as it wouldn't be a show without some additional guests, I'm really happy to introduce our first guest, who will be bringing us insights from one of the world's largest brands in AV, Samsung. I'd like to introduce Harri Hakala, Key Account Manager from Samsung Electronics. Welcome, Harri. It's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks to be here. Nice to be here. Thanks, Ossi.
So you're one of the biggest providers of display systems in the whole world. How do you see the display market development for LED walls?
Well, the growth is very huge. The demand is growing, and it's global, and it's also here in our business area, which is Nordic. We are also seeing huge growth. And well, we are going to more digital world. That brings us more needs, and customers are also having new needs, new use scenarios where they need digital surfaces, and also the prices have gone lower, so the price point is more affordable.
Yeah.
So that brings us more customers that are able to purchase LED technology. That grows the market naturally. And of course, the products that we produce these days are much more easier to install and use than they were like 5 years ago. It was more professional AV. Now it's more common AV. It's more common products, easier to use. You don't need AV expert to use the product.
Yeah.
So it's more like a normal display.
So it's moved towards that normal people like me also have these sort of systems.
Yes, that brings the growth.
Yeah.
Naturally. Yeah.
So what are LED surfaces used for today? Especially, are there any changes in how they are nowadays utilized?
We are going to more digital needs, which means we need to dynamically change content. So the old-fashioned medias like printed medias or etc., which it's like static, you cannot change the media. It's the digital media is what you need today. So we have quite many verticals, quite many customer needs where they use LED screens these days. Shopping centers, indoor, outdoor, retail shops, corporate AV, meaning lobby areas for Caverion, lobby area, auditoriums, meeting rooms. Then we discussed about control rooms. That's also one area. And well, also in transport or, and hotels in quite wide range. We need digital display in all around these days.
Yeah, it sounds like it's utilized almost everywhere right now. So how do you feel? Has LED technology supplanted other technologies, or has it created a new market for itself?
I think it's mostly a new market. The other media still have their own share and their own needs. It's mostly new market. It's not supplanted totally, but I would have to say that it has affected the media changes. The media possibilities that you can choose.
Yeah. So there's quite a rapid adaptation of LED technology going on right now.
Yeah, I would say in the last 3 years the change is quite remarkable. Yeah.
What about then other sorts of audiovisual technologies? For example, what do you feel about LED screens replacing video walls or projectors or big screens? And are there any differences in these technologies?
Yeah, there are differences. There is still market for all of these technologies. They still have their own points of sales, and they still have their own customers that will still need this. We also sell video walls these days, and LED has a little bit different markets. Quite many needs are going to more towards to the LED technology. It's serving quite well, but still video walls and projectors are there. Also printed media is there. So yeah.
So it's both, really.
Yeah.
Then to one of the most important questions of the whole evening, how can we help our customer choose the right technology for them?
Yeah, well, I will have to say that cooperation with Caverion, we always end up in the best solutions with when we cooperate with our partners, and when we are involved in the project in the early beginning, and we can let's say we can understand more of the customer's real needs, what they are, and try to discuss about what the content will be, what kind of circumstances will be around the screen where they are installing the screen, and what kind of other AV systems are in the room, what's the use case. We try to understand that, and after understanding that, we are much more closer to offer right products. That means also much more closer to a right price point, of course. So absolutely. Understanding the customer is really important, and that's what we try to get ourselves involved in the project together.
Even though it is a bit of a cliche to say that only when you actively listen can you hear, but it is the truth in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for these amazing insights and for coming and having this discussion with us today, Harri. And now I'd like to bring in a second point of view with our next guest, Toni Sarjala, who's the regional sales manager at Crestron. Welcome, Toni.
Hello.
Hi, and welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. So, first of all, for those who aren't so familiar with your company, can you tell us a little bit about Crestron?
Sure. Crestron is an American company. It's privately owned, established almost 50 years ago. And we design and we manufacture all kinds of audiovisual products, from control devices to video distribution, all the way to unified communication devices. And we also operate in multiple business sectors, like from commercial to residential, government, and also we do something like a marine business. So we are working with super and mega yachts, and we install our products there.
Okay, so you have a very wide range of solutions then. You also said something about video conferencing solutions, and that must mean that the past couple of years have been really exciting times for you. Well, we can't have a discussion these days without talking about, well, can I say the elephant in the room? COVID. So I kind of have to bring that up. But how did the transition go? How did the digital leap go from your perspective?
Yeah, that was interesting times. First, we managed to survive pretty well. Nothing that special that didn't happen. But of course, when everybody started to work remotely from home, then we noticed that there was a tremendous need for unified communication devices also in the corporate worlds and education, like classrooms and also universities especially. And that was something that we saw. So big increase in that business areas.
Absolutely. Well, how did your customers react to the changed situation? And do you think it will continue this way with remote teaching and remote conferencing?
Yeah, I'm sure it will continue. So the hybrid work and then the hybrid way of working and learning is here to stay, definitely. And that sort of is good thing, because now people can choose more freely where they want to work and how they want to work. But of course, especially companies, they need to focus more on that area, because meeting rooms are totally different than for example, home offices. So the technologies, what they need in the corporate meeting rooms, require a lot of focus on the video and audio devices, and the way to make those room working perfectly is something that you need to have professional people to design and install and program everything. Otherwise, it's going to be way too complicated to work in those kind of rooms and those equipments.
That is so true. Thank you so much for these amazing insights, Toni, and thank you for having you here, or thank you for coming here. Sorry. I'd like to welcome our third and final guest of the evening, Jyri Poittinen from Helsingin Yliopiston Kiinteistöpalvelut Oy. Welcome, Jyri.
Kiitos. On erittäin mukava tulla tähän tilaisuuteen.
Mukava, että pääsit mukaan. Ja tässä vaiheessa vaihdamme myös hetkeksi suomen kielelle. Eli ihanaa, että olet päässyt meidän kanssa tänne hieman keskustelemaan. Ja ensin voisin kysyä, pystytkö kertomaan hieman Helsingin yliopiston kiinteistöpalvelun toiminnoista?
Joo, kiitos. Helsingin yliopisto toimii 4 kampuksella ja sitten toimii myös tämmöisissä etäasemilla, tutkimusasemilla ympäri Suomea. Ja sitten meillä on myös sitten tämmöisiä etäpisteitä esimerkiksi Vaasassa, Mikkelissä, sitten muutamia niin kuin jopa tutkimusasemia ulkomailla. Et meillä on noin 400 tämmöistä yhteiskäyttöistä opetustilaa Helsingin alueella ja sitten myös sitten tämmöisiä kokous- ja erityistiloja, noin 400 kappaletta kanssa, jotka on sitten yksiköiden omia opetustiloja. Näissä kaikissa 800 tilassa on AV-tekniikkaa, jota me varustellaan.
Eli teillä on erittäin laajasti näitä tiloja, mitä te hoidatte.
Kyllä, todella valtavasti.
Miten teillä oli etäopiskelu huomioitu ennen covid-tilannetta?
Meillä oli oikeastaan onni siinä, että me oltiin jollain tavalla niin kuin aloitettu jo muutamia vuosia sitten etäopetukset ja tämmöiset niin kuin, striimaukset kautta tallennukset Helsingin yliopistossa. Ja meillä oli rakennettu tämmöisiä opetustiloja noin 35 kappaletta eri puolille, näin eri kampuksille ja nämä toimi hyvin tämmöisenä striimaustiloina. Ja se lähti niin kuin sujumaan kohtuullisen helposti sitten nimenomaan tekniikan osalta ainakin tämä covidin aikana, että saatiin ehkä lisättyä siinä vielä jonkin verran siinä alkuvaiheessa muutamia tämmöisiä etäopetustiloja sinne lisää.
Eli voi sanoa, että etäopetukseen siirtyminen sujui teille aika mukavasti.
Näin voi sanoa, että oltiin tavallaan varauduttu jonkin verran. Että ehkä siellä oli silloin aikoinaan, kun oli tämä tuhkapilvi, niin se oli semmoinen hyvä esimerkki siinä, että mitä voi tapahtua maailmassa, niin silloin jo pikkusen niin kuin reagoitiin tähän asiaan.
Kyllä. Ja miten nyt sitten covid-tilanteen aikana sujui? Tapahtuiko muutoksia sen aikana, miten te toimitte?
Joo, eli suuri muutos oli siinä, kun kaikki niin kun opetus meni etäopetukseen, niin tietenkään meidän kaikki yliopiston luennoitsijat eivät olleet niin kun varautuneet ja tottuneet siihen, että luennot pidetään etänä, jolloin meidän tuen tarve kasvoi räjähdysmäisesti siinä alkuvaiheessa ja sitten myös meillä oli tämän toinen iso asia, mikä yliopistolla muuttui, oli tämä opintosuunnitelma, joka sitten ruuhkautti, että väitöksiä tuli todella valtavasti silloin vuonna 2020 ja nämä kaikki jouduttiin tekemään sitten etäväitöksenä ja se oli erittäin iso muutos, että sekin vaati meiltä todella paljon henkilöresursseja ja kiitos siitä todellakin meidän porukalla, että on pystynyt tukemaan sen määrän, että näitä väitöksiä oli yli 500 kappaletta silloin 2020.
Väitöksen tekeminen etänä kuulostaa kyllä ainakaan omalta mielestäni todella jännittävältä tilanteelta.
Ja sehän on oikeastaan hyvä, että siinä tuli myös sitten uusi väitöskäytäntö meille, että nythän Helsingin yliopistossa meillä on 3 väitöksiä, että meillä on etäväitökset mahdolliset ja sitten meillä on tämmöiset tallennettavat väitökset, missä on myös sitten henkilökunta paikalla ja sitten on ne normaalit väitökset, että se muutti sitä käytäntöä, eli myös saatiin sinne väitöksiin tavallaan laadukkaampia vastaväittelijöitä, kun ei ole, voidaan kutsua mistä päin maailmaa, vaan se vastaväittelijä.
Kuulostaa siltä, että jotakin positiivista on myös tullut tästä tilanteesta.
Kyllä, iso rikiloikka, kyllä.
Kyllä. Miten muuten tämä on muuttanut teidän opetusteknologisia ratkaisuja tai tuliko muita tällaisia strategisia uusia linjauksia?
Joo, hyvä kysymys. Että meillä mietitään sitä kovasti, että onko se niin kuin tulevaisuudessa niin kuin kaikista opetustiloista meillä pitäisi pystyä tekemään hybridiopetusta kautta striimaamaan ulospäin. Ja se on ehkä se niin kuin suurin asia, mitä me joudutaan tässä niin kuin miettimään. Esimerkiksi Helsingin yliopiston päärakennuksen vanha puoli, mikä on Caverionin urakoima, niin siellähän me varauduttiin jokaisessa opetustilassa siihen, että kaikki tilat ovat tämmöisiä hybridiopetustiloja, jolloin tapahtuu maailmassa mitä vaan, no melkein mitä vaan, silleen, että pystytään sitten opetusta jatkamaan. Mutta siinä on tietenkin pieniä niin kuin asioita, mitkä niin kuin on meillä vielä niin kuin keskustelussa Helsingin yliopistossa, että siellä on nimenomaan näiden luennoitsijoiden jaksaminen. Ja tämä hybridiopetus ei ole niin yksinkertainen malli, että jos osa opiskelijoista on siellä opetustilassa ja osa on siellä langan päässä, niin tavallaan se kuormittaa sitä luennoitsijaa todella valtavasti ja sitä pitää niin kuin jollain tavalla ratkaista ja siihen ollaan Helsingin yliopistossa miettimässä sitä strategiaa myös, että mitenkä nämä asiat, tila-asiat kautta sitten se niin kuin pedagoginen puoli pitäisi jollain tavalla ratkaista.
Selvästi koette kuitenkin, että hybridistrategia ja hybridiopetus on tullut jäädäkseen. Kyllä jollain tasolla ainakin on. Että kyllä me nähdään se, että se on tulevaisuutta ja sanotaan näin, että se niin kuin normaali semmoinen frontaaliopetus niin kuin varmasti poistuu yliopistolta, että siellä ei ole enää semmoisia perinteisiä luentoja, vaan nehän voidaan striimata sinne ulospäin ja tallentaa. Ja sitten täytyy olla joku lisäarvo siinä, että opiskelijat tulee sinne kampukselle ja opiskelee ja se on sitä syventävää ryhmätyöskentelyopetusta. Juuri näin. Kiitos vielä näistä näkökulmista ja kiitos, että pääsit meidän kanssa keskustelemaan audiovisuaalisten ratkaisujen käytöstä opetuksessa.
Joo, kiitos oikein paljon teille, että kutsuitte. Tämä oli erittäin miellyttävä tilaisuus.
Oli mukava, että pääsit. Kiitoksia. Time flies when you're having fun, so it's actually time for our last question. And it's the second most important question for today. The first one was the one for customers, naturally. But the second one. So, if you only remember one single thing from this discussion, what would that be?
In my mind, the non-working screen or bad sound quality in an auditorium forms an impression of the building or the company. So if their AV doesn't work, what about their core business? So not many people need to know how the fire detection works or access control works, but everybody notices when the presenter's microphone does not work.
That's so true.
Yeah, I have to agree with Juhana. Don't fail on this.
I actually couldn't agree more. And what a great way to end this discussion. And thank you to all of our guests. Thank you to Ossi, Juhana, to both of our amazing guests. And please remember, we're here to help. If you have any questions, just contact us. Thank you and goodbye.